The paper hit my desk so hard it knocked my coffee mug sideways. I didn't even look up when she walked in. I knew that walk. Gloria Stanton stood over me, both hands flat on the contract, like she was trying to press it through the wood. Her voice was completely flat, which was somehow worse than yelling. "Sign this non-compete, or I will blacklist you in 48 countries. Your career will be over. I have connections everywhere." I looked down at the document. Then I picked up the pen. "You're right," I said, meeting her eyes. "Connections are everything." What she didn't know was that signing that paper was the beginning of her end. My name is Victor Caldwell. I'm 54. And what I'm about to tell you is how the worst day of my career turned into the best decision I ever made. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the full picture. I joined the firm at 49. Mid-size consulting company, solid reputation in domestic markets, but their international division was basically a folder of expired contacts and 3 underdeveloped country partnerships. Nobody had ever really committed to building it properly. They hired me specifically to change that. I threw myself into it. I was on calls with partners in Singapore at 2 in the morning. I flew to Sao Paulo on 48 hours notice to meet manufacturers who could help us build supply chains that didn't exist yet. I learned enough Mandarin and Portuguese to hold real business conversations, not tourist phrases, because I refused to let a translator be the only bridge between us and the people we needed to trust us. It was hard, long flights, missed dinners weeks away from home, but it was also the best work I'd ever done in my career. By year 2, we were operating in 9 countries. By year 4, we had 18 active markets and partnerships that were built on actual trust, not just signed agreements. That distinction matters more than most people in corporate offices understand. That's when Gloria showed up. She was brought in from outside, hired specifically to oversee international expansion, which was a little ironic given that I had built the whole thing from nothing. At first, she seemed sharp. She asked detailed questions about our processes, our key contacts, our approach in each market. I thought she was trying to understand what we'd built so she could help take it further. I was wrong. It started small. In client meetings, she would present strategies I had developed as if they were her own ideas. When we landed a major contract, her name appeared first in the company announcements. When trade publications wanted to interview someone about our international growth, it was always Gloria who ended up quoted. I told myself it was just how corporate politics worked at her level. I kept my head down and kept building. The breaking point came with the Africa expansion. I had spent 8 months on that project, 8 months of relationship building across 6 countries, navigating different regulatory environments, learning how business trust actually works in those markets, flying out personally when things got complicated. It was the most careful and patient work I'd ever done. When we finally locked down a major contract that positioned us as a dominant player in that region, Gloria scheduled a board presentation. She invited me to attend. I assumed that meant I'd finally get some recognition for the work. I sat in the back of the conference room and watched her present my research, my strategies, my relationships as her vision. She spoke about her approach to international expansion, her understanding of global markets, her strategy for Africa. Not once did she say my name. The board loved it. They talked about promoting her to VP. I sat there and felt completely invisible, not angry, not yet, just invisible. That's when I started keeping records. Every email I sent, every call I logged, every deal I personally closed. I wasn't planning anything at that point. I just needed proof for myself that the work was real and that I had done it. The industry was starting to take notice of what we'd built. Conference organizers were reaching out. Trade publications wanted to feature our expansion model, and every single time Gloria stepped into the spotlight, I watched her give presentations about markets she had never visited, using insights she had never developed, describing relationships she had never built, and she was convincing enough that nobody questioned it from the outside. Meanwhile, I was becoming a ghost inside my own operation. New team members were told that Gloria was the architect of our international success. Clients who had worked directly with me were being redirected to communicate through her office. I was being written out of the story of my own work. I kept telling myself that excellence would eventually be recognized, that if I just delivered better results, the truth would become impossible to ignore. That was a mistaken thinking that took me too long to correct. The opportunity came through a recruiter. A smaller firm focused on emerging markets was looking for someone to lead their Asia expansion. The role was built around everything I had spent 5 years learning. The interviews were unlike anything I had experienced in a long time. These people had done their research. They knew what I had actually accomplished, regardless of whose name appeared on the official reports. They asked about my real experiences and they listened carefully to the answers. When they made the offer, I didn't accept immediately. Part of me still wanted to give the firm a chance to acknowledge what they were about to lose. I requested a meeting with Gloria. I told her about the offer and said I was hoping we could talk about my future at the company. Her response was immediate and dismissive. "Victor, I think you're overestimating your contribution to our international operations. You've been involved in implementation, but the strategic vision has always come from leadership. If another company wants to hire you for that kind of work, that's your decision to make." Implementation. 5 years of building one of the most successful international divisions in the industry, and she reduced it to implementation. I asked for a few days to consider my options. That was the mistake. I told her too much, including the title, the scope of the role, and what they were offering financially. I watched something shift behind her eyes when I said it out loud. She had just realized that another company valued me in a way she had been pretending wasn't possible, and that scared her. 3 days later, she called me into her office. That's when the contract hit my desk. The original non-compete I had signed 5 years earlier was standard. 1 year, direct competitors only, no soliciting clients for 18 months. Reasonable terms that I had no problem with when I signed them. This new document was something else entirely. 3 years instead of 1. Any company operating in overlapping markets, not just direct competitors. No professional contact with anyone in the firm's network. Not just clients, but vendors, suppliers, regulatory contacts, industry associations. The language was broad enough that it could theoretically block me from working in international consulting anywhere in the world. "This isn't legally enforceable," I said. "Maybe not in a courtroom," she replied, "but I don't need a courtroom. One phone call from me and references stop returning calls. Doors stop opening. Opportunities disappear. I have relationships with every major firm in this industry across 6 continents." She leaned forward slightly. "Sign this non-compete, or I will end your career in 48 countries. I have the connections to do it." I looked at the document for a moment, then I picked up the pen and signed it. "You're right," I said. "Connections are everything." Then I submitted my resignation, effective immediately, and walked out. She thought she had won. I could see it in her expression as I left, that satisfied look of someone who believes they just neutralized a threat. She had no idea what she had actually set in motion. My wife didn't panic when I told her that evening. She asked 2 questions. Did I have a plan, and did I believe in it? I told her I had 90 days to build one. She said, "Fine." That was the whole conversation. After 26 years together, she understood that I didn't walk away from things without a reason. For the next 90 days, I disappeared completely from the industry. No conferences, no professional events, no calls with former colleagues. To anyone watching from the outside, it looked like Gloria had done exactly what she threatened. Victor Caldwell had been quietly removed from the picture. But I wasn't sitting still. I spent those 90 days doing 3 things. First, I read that contract word by word, multiple times. Then I had 2 employment attorneys read it independently. What they found was genuinely useful. The contract was constructed to prevent me from competing directly or working with existing clients. But the language said nothing about creating a category of service that didn't exist at the time the contract was written. There was no clause covering advisory work that addressed problems the traditional consulting industry wasn't equipped to handle. The firm's lawyers had written the contract to protect against known competition. They hadn't accounted for something entirely new. Second, I reached out to contacts who had no connection to my former employer's client base. Vendors I had worked with independently, regulatory contacts in several markets, people at industry associations, academic researchers I had met at conferences over the years. None of these relationships were covered by any restriction in the contract. And these were people who knew my actual work, not the version of it that appeared in Gloria's presentations. Third, I studied. I had been so deep in execution for 5 years that I hadn't had time to look at the larger picture of where international business was heading. I spent weeks reading research on regulatory shifts, new trade frameworks, technology's impact on cross-border operations, and how cultural expectations in key markets were evolving faster than most traditional consulting firms could track. The old playbook was becoming outdated, and most established firms were too committed to their existing methodologies to adapt quickly. I wasn't. I had nothing to protect and 90 days to think clearly. By day 89, I had a complete business plan for something that genuinely didn't exist yet in the market. On day 91, I filed the paperwork. I called it Global Insight Advisory. The focus was helping companies navigate the intersection of technology regulation, cultural adaptation, and international market entry. Not management consulting in the traditional sense. Not implementation work. Strategic advisory specifically for the problems that fell between the established service categories, the challenges that traditional firms kept handing off to each other without ever actually solving. The timing turned out to be better than I had planned for. While I had been executing international expansion for my former employer, the world had been changing in ways that most of the industry hadn't fully absorbed yet. New trade agreements were reshaping supply chains, regulatory frameworks around data and technology were diverging sharply between major markets. Cultural expectations around partnership and trust in emerging economies were shifting in ways that companies trained on Western business models kept misreading. I had spent 5 years on the ground in those markets. I understood what was actually happening, not just what the report said was happening. That gap between the report and the reality was exactly where Global Insight Advisory would operate. My first client came through Ted Ashworth, a strategic planning director I had met 2 years earlier at a trade conference in Chicago. His company was struggling to establish a real presence in Southeast Asia. They had already hired 2 different consulting firms, and neither engagement had produced meaningful results. When we sat down and I walked through what I was seeing in those markets, he stopped me about 20 minutes in. "Why didn't anyone tell us this before?" he asked. "Because the firms you hired were using frameworks built for markets that operated differently," I said. "The fundamentals haven't changed, but the execution has to." We agreed on a 3-month engagement. I was not optimistic about turning things around quickly, but I knew exactly what needed to be addressed first. The 3-month engagement worked better than I expected. Not because I did anything dramatic, but because I focused on the specific problems that had been blocking them instead of delivering a broad strategy document that would sit in a folder. By month 3, they had their first real traction in 2 Southeast Asian markets. They immediately hired us for expansion into African markets. Then they referred us to 2 other companies facing similar challenges. Word moved quickly through the networks I had been building for years. Not the official industry networks where Gloria held influence, but the informal connections between people who actually did the work. Project managers, regional directors, operations leads, regulatory specialists. The people who knew who actually solved problems when things went wrong and who just took credit afterward. By month 6, Global Insight Advisory had 7 clients across 4 continents. We were profitable by month 5. I had brought on 2 people I trusted from previous work, and we were already managing more than 3 of us could comfortably handle. For the first time in my career, my name was attached to my work. Every report, every presentation, every result had my name on it. Not because I was chasing recognition, but because there was no one else in the room to hand the credit to. It felt different than I expected. Not triumphant, just correct. Meanwhile, back at my former firm, things were coming apart in ways I was hearing about through the industry grapevine. Without the institutional knowledge I had spent 5 years building, Gloria was struggling to maintain relationships I had established. Partners were reporting communication breakdowns. Projects were running behind schedule and over budget. A new market entry in Southeast Asia had stalled completely because the approach being used ignored regulatory changes I had flagged internally 18 months earlier. She hired replacements, but none of them had the years of relationship history and market knowledge I had built. They were starting from zero in markets where success required deep established trust. You cannot shortcut that process. I knew that better than anyone. The annual International Business Conference was scheduled for October, about 7 months after I had started Global Insight Advisory. It was the most important event in the industry calendar. Major partnerships were announced there. Key relationships were reinforced, and my former firm had a prominent speaking slot. Gloria was scheduled to present their international strategy to an audience of over 2,000 industry leaders. I had been invited to speak on 3 panels. I declined all of them. I did not want any appearance of competing directly with my former employer, while the non-compete was still active. I was not going to give anyone a reason to question my integrity. Then Roy Pemberton called. Roy served on the board of directors at my former firm. He had heard about Global Insight Advisory through multiple channels and asked if we could meet. We had dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown, just the 2 of us. He was direct from the start. He asked detailed questions about our methodology, our client results, and how we saw the international consulting landscape evolving. About halfway through the conversation, he put down his fork and looked at me steadily. "Victor, I need to ask you something directly. Were you the primary architect of our international expansion over the past 5 years?" I chose my words carefully. "I was significantly involved in the development and implementation of many of those initiatives." "That's not what I asked," he said. He told me what he had been hearing. Ted Ashworth had mentioned that I personally flew to Singapore 3 times in a single month to resolve problems the firm's senior leadership couldn't address remotely. Renee Colburn from Pacific Dynamics said I had spent nearly 2 years building the relationships that made their joint venture possible. Scott Mercer from Global Supply Solutions told Roy that I was the only person at the firm who had ever understood their regulatory challenges well enough to actually help them navigate government approvals. Roy paused. "These people don't know Gloria Stanton exists. They have never heard her name, but every single one of them knows you." I didn't respond immediately. The contract I had signed prohibited me from disparaging my former employer or discussing internal operations with outside parties. Roy, I can't comment on internal company dynamics, I said, but I can tell you that I'm proud of the work I did and the relationships I built over those 5 years. He nodded slowly. I thought so. Then he told me what was actually happening inside the firm. Gloria was preparing her presentation for the conference the following week. But the board had been receiving increasingly alarming feedback from international partners. Projects were failing. Relationships that had taken years to build were deteriorating. Ground was being lost to competitors in several major markets. The board had started asking questions internally, and the answers they were getting didn't add up. Roy was not at the conference that week, but he called me the Monday after and described what had happened in enough detail that I could picture the room. Gloria had prepared a polished presentation, major achievements, ambitious growth plans, confident delivery. On paper, it probably looked strong. She made a critical error. She had based her remarks on outdated information and had fundamentally misread the current state of several key relationships. When she claimed credit for establishing a major partnership with a large Asian conglomerate, the CEO of that company was sitting in the front row. He interrupted her mid-sentence to ask why the joint venture she was describing bore no resemblance to the actual agreement they had signed. He also asked why their primary contact at the firm, the person who had personally worked with them for over 2 years, was no longer there. I heard about part of it a different way. A supply chain contact of mine who had been in the room sent me a text midway through her presentation. It said, "Is she reading from your slides?" I knew immediately what had happened. I recognized the structure of the deck she was using because I had built the original version of it on a layover in Frankfurt 2 years earlier. When she discussed the Africa expansion, 3 different partners stood up during the presentation to ask why their contracts hadn't been honored and why communication had broken down so completely that they were now considering legal action. When she outlined plans for entering new markets, industry experts in the audience pointed out that her proposed strategies ignored regulatory changes that had been in effect for over a year, changes that made her entire approach unworkable from a compliance standpoint. By the end of her 30-minute presentation, the room was restless. The Q&A session turned into something closer to an interrogation. Partners were publicly questioning the firm's competence. Competitors were taking notes on every weakness being aired in front of 2,000 people. Board members in the audience were visibly uncomfortable. The aftermath moved fast. Within 48 hours of the conference, 3 major partners had formally requested emergency meetings to discuss their concerns about the firm's international operations. 2 clients had initiated reviews of their existing contracts. Trade publications were running articles questioning whether the firm could maintain its position in international markets. The damage to their reputation in a single afternoon was significant. Roy called me the following Monday morning. The board met an emergency session yesterday, he said. We are facing a crisis that we don't fully understand. Our international division is collapsing, and we don't know how to stop it because we never properly understood what made it work in the first place. He was quiet for a moment. Victor. We need help, not just outside consulting help. We need someone who knows our business, our relationships, our history in these markets. Someone who can help us understand what went wrong and build something that actually functions. What about Gloria? I asked. Gloria has been reassigned to our domestic operations. She will be managing our regional office in Denver going forward. I took a breath before responding. Roy, I have to be honest with you about something. Global Insight Advisory does not do traditional management consulting. We don't go into companies and restore old approaches or patch existing systems. If you're looking for someone to turn back the clock and rebuild what you had before, we are genuinely not the right fit for that. That is not what I'm asking for, he said. We need someone who can help us build something new, something that actually works in the current environment. We need innovation, not restoration. And we need someone the partners actually trust. We negotiated for 2 weeks, not just about scope and fees, but about structure and autonomy. I was not going to walk back into that firm in any capacity that put me under layers of management that could interfere with the work. I had spent 5 years watching what happened when good work got filtered through the wrong hands. The terms we agreed on were better than anything I could have imagined when I signed that non-compete contract 8 months earlier. Global Insight Advisory would serve as the exclusive strategic advisor for all international operations at the firm. We would have direct access to the board, independent budget authority for our engagement, complete control over our methodology and approach. We would help them rebuild their international division from the ground up, but we would do it the right way, starting with honest assessments of what had broken and why. And Gloria would have zero authority over anything related to international operations. The official announcement went out on a Tuesday morning. Industry coverage treated it as a significant strategic move. Partners and clients who had been concerned about the firm's direction over the past several months suddenly had a reason to stay engaged rather than walk away. 3 days after the announcement, I received an email that had been forwarded through several channels to reach me. It was from Gloria, addressed to the executive team with the subject line, "Concerns about external partnership." The message was exactly what I expected. She questioned whether it was appropriate to bring in a consultant with such intimate knowledge of internal operations. She raised the possibility of conflicts of interest. She suggested the firm should focus on developing internal expertise rather than relying on outside advisors. Roy's reply was copied to the entire executive team. "Gloria, thank you for your input. However, decisions regarding international operations are no longer within your area of responsibility. Global Insight Advisory was selected based on demonstrated expertise and a deep understanding of the relationships that are critical to our success in international markets. We are confident this partnership will restore our standing and open new opportunities. No further input on this matter is needed." I printed that email, folded it once, and put it in my desk drawer, not as a trophy. I want to be clear about that. I kept it as a reminder of something that took me too long to learn. For years, I had been waiting for someone else to recognize my value. I kept working harder, delivering better results, telling myself that if I just performed at a high enough level, the truth would eventually become impossible to ignore. I let someone else control the narrative of my own work for 5 years because I believed that excellence would speak for itself. It doesn't always work that way. Some people will take what you build and put their name on it regardless of how clearly the work speaks. And waiting for them to change is not a strategy. The real shift happened the moment I stopped trying to get recognized inside a system that was designed to keep me invisible and started building something outside of it entirely. Something that was mine by definition, where no one could walk into a boardroom and present my work as their vision. That's what those 90 days were actually about. Not revenge, not strategy in a calculating sense. Just the decision to bet on myself instead of waiting for someone else to make that bet for me. The partnership with my former firm lasted 2 years. We rebuilt their international division with approaches that fit the actual market conditions they were operating in. We restored relationships that had nearly collapsed. We opened 4 new markets using frameworks that became something of a model for other firms watching from the outside. Global Insight Advisory grew during those 2 years in ways I had not projected when I filed the paperwork on day 91. We went from a solo operation to a team of 6 people with offices in 2 countries and active client relationships across 6 continents. We were turning down projects by the end of year 1 because we could not take on more without compromising the quality of the work. That was a problem I had never had before, and I was fine with it. Trade publications started covering our approach to international expansion as something worth examining. Conference organizers who had previously booked Gloria to talk about work I had done were now calling to ask if I would speak about what we were building at Global Insight Advisory. Industry associations asked me to contribute to research on cross-cultural operations and emerging market strategy. For the first time in my career, my name and my work were the same thing. Nobody was standing between them. And Gloria, still in Denver, managing a regional office. I have no idea if she is good at it or not, and honestly, I stopped thinking about her a long time ago. That is actually the part of this story I want you to sit with for a moment. When she threatened me in that office, when she told me she would end my career in 48 countries, I think she genuinely believed that her connections were her power, that the ability to make phone calls and close doors was the thing that determined outcomes in this industry. She was not entirely wrong about how the game is played at certain levels. Politics and networks matter in corporate environments. I had watched them work against me for years, but there is a difference between connections and relationships. Gloria had connections. People who knew her name, who had taken her calls, who had been in the same rooms at the same events, a network built on visibility and title. What I had was different. I had partners in Southeast Asia who called me directly when something was going wrong because they knew I would give them a straight answer. I had contacts in African markets who had watched me fly out on short notice to stand in a room with them when a deal was falling apart. I had vendors and regulatory contacts who had seen me work through problems that other people had given up on. Those are not connections, those are relationships, and you cannot blacklist a relationship. You cannot make a phone call that erases 5 years of someone showing up and doing the actual work. That distinction is the whole story, as far as I am concerned. Here's the other thing I want to say, and I'm saying it specifically to the men watching this who are somewhere in their 50s and have been through something similar. At 54, I started a company from scratch with 90 days of runway and a non-compete contract designed to bury me. There was no guarantee it would work. My wife asked if I had a plan, and I told her I had 90 days to build one. That was the honest answer. It worked not because I was smarter than Gloria or better connected or luckier with timing. It worked because I had 5 years of real work behind me that nobody could take away by reassigning credit. The foundation was already built. I just had to stop letting someone else stand on it. If you are in a position right now where someone is taking credit for your work or threatening to end your career or making you feel like you have no options, I want you to think about what you have actually built over your career. Not what your title says, not what the org chart shows, what you actually know, who actually trusts you, what problems you can actually solve that other people cannot. That is your foundation, and it is yours regardless of what anyone else puts their name on. You can take a man's title. You can move him out of his office. You can even try to lock him out of an industry for 90 days, but you cannot take what he built with his own hands over years of showing up and doing the work right. The best response to a threat is not to fight it directly. It is to outgrow it. Build something they cannot control, develop relationships they cannot manipulate, create value they cannot diminish. Then watch as their threats become irrelevant and their names become footnotes in the story of what you built. If any part of this resonated with you, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And if you have been through something like this, I want to hear how you handled it. We are all stronger than someone else's opinion of us. Sometimes the best move is just refusing to stay buried.